We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and welcome to a new world of gods and monsters. This is Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. This week, we are talking the 2017 film The Mummy. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my cursed co-host, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
I am. I don't know if I'd ever watched this through completely before doing the show here. So, yeah, I was excited to check it out.
Okay, safe to say you did not see this in theaters then, 5 years ago, huh?
No, I don't remember exactly when this came out, but I think I was either in the midst or had just moved. And as such was not really in a place to go watch movies. And then I'm sure the word of mouth and general reception probably didn't aid in my desire to seek it out.
That sounds fair. I had never seen this movie before until preparing for this podcast. I remember it being released. I remember it coming out in theaters, and the trailers didn't grab me. We'll say the story around it, the dark universe stuff, the reception of the movie, nothing was, compelling me to go see it in theaters. I had always had a curiosity about it, though. Like, I wanted, whether the movie's good or bad or however it lands, I wanted to see it out of curiosity. Like, what does a Tom Cruise The Mummy movie look like?
Right.
Is this going to be in the vein of the Brendan Fraser movies? Is it supposed to be classic monsters or new modern twists? As a big action extravaganza because it's Tom Cruise? Like, I really didn't know what they were doing, and I've got those curiosities quenched now having watched it 5 years later, and I'm excited to talk about it, man. Specifically the positives, of course, and what actually works in this movie. This movie is kind of a notorious, not the biggest flop or box office bomb like we'll get into, but it's notoriously falling short of studio expectations. Like, they made such a big deal about launching a universe with this movie and almost immediately scrapped those plans after this hit theaters that it kind of becomes a joke, like a laughingstock of, hey, remember when they tried to do a new Universal Monsters universe and quietly just abandoned it after one movie or two movies, depending on what, revisionist history you want to look at.
Yeah, I was going to say the irony of this being a failed attempt at Dark Universe is that this is essentially the second attempt that was made this century that was designed at being the launching point of this new kind of Universal Monsters universe. The first one being Dracula Untold, which I believe was 2012, 13. I don't remember off the top of my head. We'll look that up and we'll figure it out. But it's just
I'll drop it in post right here, Andrew. Right here.
Dracula Untold, released October 10th, 2014.
Okay. But that was an attempt at a Dracula reboot with Luke Evans in the lead that I think kind of tried to make an argument of making Dracula a more sympathetic character. I think the idea was that he was going to be kind of more of an anti-hero versus kind of more of a straight villain. And so there's definitely some setup in there, I know, that was designed at kind of moving things into the present day and setting up a Universal Monsters universe. And then that doesn't come to fruition. And then 5 years later, to be fair, this was preceded by a whole big announcement and like a rollout and like cast photos. Like, they had people cast for future roles. We knew who some of these people were going to be playing. Like, we had directors announced for other films. They were putting in the work, and some of those movies came pretty close to starting production, and then ultimately just fizzled when this movie kind of just failed to meet expectations. But yeah, it's kind of become like a punchline for just like, we're launching a cinematic universe, and it's gone.
Yeah, there is a Universal Dark Universe Twitter account. It's official, but it doesn't even have like the blue check mark, which is kind of funny. It's got 2 tweets. They're still up. Go look at them. It's kind of funny. The second one is like you said, a cast photo. It has Tom Cruise and Sofia Boutella from this movie. It's got Johnny Depp, Russell Crowe, and Javier Bardem all in this photo. And it says, like, the universe is beginning. And as we know, it never happened. But Johnny Depp was poised to play the Invisible Man. Russell Crowe, as we learned in this movie, is cast as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And then Javier Bardem is Frankenstein's monster. There was further speculation that Angelina Jolie was potentially going to be Bride of Frankenstein. So they had a lot of plans. They thought they were going to be rolling in it coming after this movie. And it just doesn't happen.
That was the next movie was supposed to be that Bride of Frankenstein film, and I forget. I think Bill Condon was maybe going to be directing that. I think Will Beall had worked on a script, and like I said, the chatter suggested that Angelina Jolie was going to play Bride of Frankenstein, and that's just so. On one hand, looking at all of this on paper, like, they shot for the moon in a lot of ways. This was casting big name talent to play these characters. It was locking them into seemingly some kind of overarching deal. I can only assume the intention was eventually to do crossover films of some kind. I mean, which is no new idea. There's plenty of the Mummy versus Frankenstein type movies in existence, whether it's from the original Universal run, the Canon Pictures stuff, or whoever. But we never find out what those plans are. Basically, all we really knew is that there was a Bride of Frankenstein film that was supposed to feature Javier Bardem, potentially Angelina Jolie, and then obviously some Invisible Man related project with Johnny Depp. But none of that comes to pass. We eventually get a different standalone, non-supernatural type Invisible Man movie by Lee Winnell, which, to be fair,
which rules.
is awesome. Yeah.
So
it's
good.
awesome. But yeah, so now we apparently they're going to be they've learned the lesson that a shared universe of monster stuff seems to not really be in the cards, and they're going to apparently just do standalone stuff now. But yeah,
what do you call the Dark Universe Avengers crossover movie? Like, you've got so and so meets so and so, you got Wolfman meeting Mummy, or Dracula meeting Frankenstein. Whenever they all come together inevitably in one movie, Andrew, what do you call that movie?
You call that movie Monster Squad, Chris.
That's awesome. Do you think they would have, like, I don't know, like a teenager?
Just to be clear here, Chris, there's a movie called Monster Squad already.
I know. Do you think they would have, like, a kid, like, hunting all of them? Isn't that the story? Like, a little kid is trying to hunt them all, like, or find them all?
Well, they all, like, come back and they end up fighting a bunch of kids. I like that movie quite a bit. I think Shane Black maybe has a credit on that one. I don't remember. But yeah, I don't really know what path you'd take, because like, obviously most of these monsters are intended to be villains, but like the end of this movie, we'll talk about it more, kind of leaves like, who is the Mummy in this shared universe? Who is all of that? How would this have gone? Like, how it's a very strange thing where, like, I struggle to think of like, are they all going to fight each other because they're trying to control the world? Which, don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily opposed to something like that. But again, like, the future end game plans of this franchise were never made clear. So we don't really know. And I don't really know what path you would have taken to get there.
Well, let's jump into the movie we have here, Andrew, as our reboot month continues. Every episode this month is focusing on a movie reboot that was poorly received. Just like The Mummy, that was released June 9th of 2017, made on a budget of $195 million. It had a huge production budget. At the box office, it actually brings in $410 million, which is more than I expected,
Yes.
but still loses nearly $100 million for the studio. Because on top of that huge production budget, there's a huge marketing budget. And this movie got a very, very wide, worldwide release and fell way short. I mean, they were undoubtedly hoping for $1 billion. Probably would have been happy with $700 million plus. 410 ain't gonna cut it. The reviews did not help. This movie holds just a 15% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Andrew, this is, no joke, one of the lowest rated movies we've covered since the beginning. It is very hard to get under 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. This one holds just 15. And on top of that, it was released in 2017. So there's tons of reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. This isn't some 80s or early 90s movie that only has like 30 reviews and it's a little bit easier to skew the numbers. Like, a lot of critics were not singing the praises of this film.
Absolutely not. And it's worth noting that box office is $410 million, but only, I think, 80 million of that is from the United States, and that's in its entire run. So in its entire run in the United States, it made $80 million, which means that, 320 of it, or 330 of it, came from the rest of the world. And so, yeah, you may say 410 million isn't that bad, but it clearly showed that the domestic showing for it, because even if that domestic was 100 million higher, that's pushing you close to at least breaking even and potentially still moving forward. But with the way it came out, there's just no way to really spin that. The domestic audience especially just wasn't there. It opened number 2 its opening weekend behind the first Wonder Woman, which is, again, the first Wonder Woman's pretty good, so it's not shocking. But I think it just reframed a lot of conceptions that they may have had about interest in this. But then again, the word of mouth had been more positive. Who knows what that would have led to? But as it is, the audience just didn't show up for this one.
Yeah, domestic 80 million. I mean, it flopped in the U.S. That's very easy to say. Usually, you're looking at about somewhere around 50% of your box office coming from America with a Hollywood film like this, a blockbuster movie. The first movie I thought of was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 2014 Michael Bay produced movie, just because we covered it on our show and I just remembered that box office being similar. So I go to Box Office Mojo, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2014. Worldwide, 485 million. Pretty close to this one here.
Yep.
Domestically, that brought in $191 million. So what does that do? 4 times what The Mummy did in America? Again, close to that almost 50% mark.
2.5 times, yeah.
2.5 times, 4 times. It's, what's
Same
the difference
thing.
between that, Andrew? Yeah.
Math, who knows?
But regardless, it's unusual for your U.S. box office to be such a small percentage of the total gross, but that's what happened here. The movie is written by Slayer's Row, a large writing team. We have some story credits, but as far as actual writing credits, you've got David Koepp, Christopher McQuarrie, and Dylan Cussman. So let's break this down. David Koepp, very high-profile writer in Hollywood for a very long time, has writing credits on movies like Jurassic Park. Maybe you've heard of it. The first Mission Impossible movie. He also wrote and directed Stir of Echoes, starring the greatest actor of all time, Kevin Bacon. You remember that movie, Andrew? I feel like that one gets lost in the shuffle these days.
I agree. I do think it gets lost in the shuffle. I think that it shouldn't, though. I think that it's worth reinvestigating based off of a 1958 novel by the same name by an author named Richard Matheson, who you may not know his name, but you have almost assuredly seen something based off of something he's done.
The movie came out the same year as The Sixth Sense, which I think kind of hurt it. It was kind of looked at as like an imitation of that or a knockoff or whatever, but it's really not. It deals with ghosts, but it's its own thing, and it's good. David Koepp, also the sole writer on Spider-Man. Maybe you've heard of it. Writer and director of Secret Window, a Stephen King adaptation that you and I, Andrew, have both gone to bat for. I think it's very underrated. I really enjoy it. David Koepp, still with the high-profile gigs. He is involved in the creative process of the new Indiana Jones movie that is yet to be release. So the dude, has worked on some big franchises, to say the least.
Yeah, and he also, for better or worse, has writing credits on Indiana Jones 4. So obviously got a bit of a working relationship with Steven Spielberg there. Also co-wrote the David Fincher, or wrote sole writer on David Fincher's Panic Room, for any fans of that. So yeah, definitely out there doing a bunch of stuff. Wrote a bunch of the Robert Langdon movies like Inferno, Angels and Demons, those types of things. Also was a writer on a film we both like, starring the greatest actor of all time, Premium Rush.
Yes, with Michael Shannon as a bad guy, and just a super cool bad guy role.
Just killing it. Oh, just absolutely crushing it. But he's a co-writer on that one.
Michael Shannon's spoiler alert death scene in that movie, haunting. It sticks with. Definitely. I think about it on a regular basis.
Yes, but no, yeah, Premium. So I guess in talking about David Koepp, we've given you about 6 movies that you should go watch now. So go watch those and then come back and we'll finish talking about The Mummy. But yeah, so no stranger to high profile stuff. No stranger to Tom Cruise. Directed or wrote the War of the Worlds adaptation that Steven Spielberg directed in 2005. Been around doing stuff for a long time. So no slouch, as it's said.
Yeah, connections to Tom Cruise is going to be a running theme because, like I said, we also have a co-writing credit from Christopher McQuarrie, who's been a writer in Hollywood for a long time, probably at one point most known for writing The Usual Suspects. Goes on to write Valkyrie, which stars Tom Cruise, is the writer and director of Jack Reacher, starring Tom Cruise, becomes a writer on the Mission Impossible series, and then takes over directing duties with Mission Impossible 5, and is directing every Mission Impossible for the foreseeable future. I don't think we will ever see a Tom Cruise film again that doesn't have the involvement of Christian McQuarrie in one way or another. They have become creative collaborators through and through. So it's no surprise that he shows up here with a writing credit.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's directed Jack Reacher and then every Mission Impossible since then. Has writing credits on The Mummy, has producer credits on Jack Reacher, Never Go Back, which was the sequel. He's got a writing and producing credit on Top Gun Maverick. It's very interesting to look at his career because Usual Suspects is 95, and then he doesn't have another like film credit until 2000, and then it's another break from 2000 to 2008 where like his official credits just don't exist in that time.
Yeah.
Or it's like odd episodes of television. But he also became a noted script doctor for a lot of that time. And I think that's probably what he was mostly doing. Like, he's got credits on the original X-Men. He's got uncredited stuff on Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, The Wolverine, Rogue One, another Tom Cruise film called American Made, which is directed by Doug Liman, who did Edge of Tomorrow. But another pretty great under the radar film that I don't think anybody saw, but and that just further reinforces that if Tom Cruise is in it, he probably called Christopher McQuarrie for help at some point.
There's some additional story credits from John Spetz, Ginny Lumet, and our director, Alex Kurtzman. Now, Alex Kurtzman, this is only his second movie that he has directed after the 2012 film People Like Us, a very small, low-budget film. But plenty of co-writing credits. Co-wrote The Legend of Zorro, Mission Impossible 3, there's our Tom Cruise connection, and Star Trek and its sequel, Star Trek Into Darkness, 2 movies that I like very, very much. And here's another movie I like a lot. He was a co-writer on The Amazing Spider-Man 2. You know what, Andrew? That still might be my favorite live-action Spider-Man.
Is it? I wouldn't have guessed.
I don't know. I mean, No Way Home is pretty good for a lot of reasons that I like Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I don't know. It's maybe 1A and 1B to me. It's very high up there. Love that movie. So again, Alex Kurtzman, lots of high-profile credits. The Tom Cruise connection. I mean, we're really getting the gang together here.
We are. Like I said, this movie had a veritable army of writers, like you said. John Spates, who again is no slouch. He's got credits on Prometheus, Doctor Strange, and the new Dune movies. Jenny Lumet is a little bit more low profile, but she wrote movies for like Jonathan Demme, like Rachel Getting Married. She has done some acting as well, and has done some now creation of shows and some executive producing on like The Man Who Fell to Earth, the new television series based off the novel and film are of the same name, as well as the new show Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which I hear nothing but good things about. That's the new live action show kind of taking place as almost parallel / leading up to the original series. And then one of our other credited writers is Dylan Cussman, who's another kind of more low profile person that's done some acting.
More known as an actor, and I did notice in his credits he was an actor in Way of the Gun, which was written and directed by Christopher McQuarrie. So I think that's our connection to getting him into the inner circle here.
Into the inner circle, yes. So, and then obviously he had bit parts in Jack Reacher, which is another connection there. So, yeah, everybody here kind of, I'm guessing, is either just the person who potentially wrote a script before Cruise was on board, and then everybody else feels like it was Cruise trying to bring in his group to get something going here, which just ties into the stories that Cruise had a heavy hand in the production of this film.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about that. We can't go through the creative team of this movie without mentioning Tom Cruise, even though technically maybe on paper in the credits he's only credited as a producer and star of the movie. He has tons of creative control, but it's not a situation of, I don't know, I won't name somebody and throw them under the bus, but we hear stories of maybe prima donna movie stars that want to get involved in the director and try to take over scenes and try to get involved in the editing process and do things that they weren't hired to do and cause a lot of conflict. This is not one of those cases. Tom Cruise was given these liberties written into his contract because Tom Cruise these days is basically a Paramount guy. All of his movies are Paramount films. So Universal really handed him the keys to the kingdom of their launching their dark universe here. And in his contract, he has final say over directors and writers in the editing process. Like he's given these liberties. And if you look at stories, I'm not going to say that there wasn't conflict that brought up on set. Kurtzman has kind of said the final product isn't exactly what he was aiming for. Doesn't seem to have any animosity towards Cruise, but it's clear where the changes were coming from. But again, he was given that free reign. It's sort of, if you want to bring Tom Cruise into your franchise, it's kind of what you have to do to get him involved these days. I mean, he's the biggest movie star in the world, and I don't even think that's an exaggeration.
I think by and large, yeah, he's one of the last of that kind of generation of movie stars from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And it's interesting because I compare this almost to something like Top Gun Maverick, where it's two movies that are kind of sitting in a bit of a similar space with trying to kind of re-energize this concept in the public eye and seeing how one was so massively successful and this one wasn't, given that both movies are essentially the same scenario of allowing Tom Cruise to have that kind of heavy amount of control. Although I do think, obviously, you watch a movie like The Mummy and you can see that there's studio stuff going on, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, that you probably can't really do much about. But it's interesting to compare the two just 5 years apart, really, as far as two different takes on Tom Cruise revitalizing something in the public eye. And yeah, it's interesting to see that it was literally written into his contract that he, we are giving you basically carte blanche on this movie to make it as good as you can.
You know what else The Mummy and Top Gun Maverick have in common?
Both titles feature the letter M.
That is true, Andrew, but I was going to say they both have a plane crash. They do indeed. There you go. There's a fun fact.
There you go.
Andrew, did you see whenever this is the other legacy of this movie, that they the studio uploaded the IMAX trailer for this movie in 2017 with the wrong sound? Did you ever see that trailer?
No, I didn't. What was that?
Andrew, I'm going to play it for you right now. We're going to get your live commentary and live reaction because it is incredible.
Oh, no.
All right, click on that so you can see it.
Yeah, let's see what we got.
All right, can you see it?
Yeah.
All right. Here we go.
All right, we got the clouds playing. All right.
Feels kind of normal so far, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Like there's a lot of images without any like sound cues to go along with it, so it's starting to feel
Right.
a little strange.
Pan, this is November 40909.
What?
What the hell?
Oh my god. It's not over.
Welcome to a new world of gods
Oh my god.
and monsters.
Oh my god, Chris.
That was officially uploaded on their official YouTube, and people had a field day with it. They tried to take it down, but as you can see, it's been
It's on the
re-uploaded many
internet.
times.
It's there
So
forever now.
yeah.
Oh my
man,
god,
that is-
Chris.
that is funny.
Ha! Like the joke sound, like the joke sound I make when I like fall or something. Just that's exactly it. Ha!
It's funny. You just take away a few, take away the music and a few sound effects, and you're left with hilarity.
You're
Like,
with isolated grunting.
yeah. Ooh,
Oh,
oh, that is funny.
oh my god!
All right,
I somehow
let's.
missed it.
Let's
I think I
cross that
heard that a
threshold.
trailer. I heard that trailer got uploaded, but I don't remember ever watching it. Much to my chagrin, apparently, my loss.
Well,
apparently, yeah.
I'm glad we got your live reaction here for the episode.
Oh my god!
but let's jump into this movie, The Mummy. When an Egyptian tomb is uncovered in Iraq, American soldiers Nick Morton and Chris Vail are first on the scene and explore the discovery along with archaeologist Jenny Halsey. Inside, they find a heavily guarded sarcophagus, and Chris is bitten by a spider. While transporting their find, Chris becomes possessed and begins murdering everyone on board the airplane until Nick shoots him dead. The airplane is struck by a large flock of birds and crashes. Only Jenny was able to escape before impact and is tasked with identifying the remaining bodies at the morgue. However, Nick reawakens, miraculously unharmed. Meanwhile, at the crash site, the mummy Amenet has been released from the sarcophagus and begins feeding on the living to regain strength and power. Nick and Jenny learn that Amenet means to use an ancient dagger to bring the god of death, Set, into our world, with Nick as his host. Also, Dr. Jekyll is there. I don't know. It was hard to get everything into that synopsis. There's a lot. Andrew,
There's a lot going
packed
on.
into this movie. I'll
There is
kick off
indeed.
the hashtag Positivity Podcast notes here early. This movie only has an hour 50 runtime, which I wouldn't call a short movie, but
Yeah.
I was anticipating like 215, 230, because I knew this
Yeah.
movie was like setting up a whole new universe. I knew one of the criticisms was maybe there's too much in this movie, and there is a lot jam-packed into it, but it doesn't get bloated to the point of an excessive runtime, and you know what? I appreciate that.
Yeah, I always appreciate when we're under 2 hours, or even more so, close to that good old 100-minute mark.
That's a sweet spot right there. Well, let's talk about the cast of this film. And as we always do, we're going to start with the high point, with the best casting and best performance in the movie. Every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, kick us off. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for The Mummy?
I'm going to go with a bit of an odd choice, and not somebody who's got a whole lot of screen time in the film, but he makes the most of it anytime he's on screen. I'm going with Jake Johnson as Chris Vale. This is basically Nick's friend, his ally, somebody that he works with at the beginning of the film, who ends up being one of the first people to kind of fall to Amunet. And he ends up recurring throughout the film at that point as this weird kind of guide to Tom Cruise throughout the film, kind of guiding him towards Amunet and what he thinks is the only way this movie is supposed to end. And in a way, how it doesn't. But yeah, he, as you kind of said when we were talking before this, he kind of strikes the right balance of, I think, what the movie is going for, where it kind of is getting into that 1999 Mummy, having that campiness kind of built in to a degree.
Yeah.
And kind of showing that, hey, yes, this is kind of a dreadfully serious monster that has come back, but there's still this humor that undercuts it. And so he's kind of bringing that humor throughout, kind of the guy who's got a little bit of the C-3PO. Oh, God, what am I stuck in the middle of again? But he nails it pretty much every time he's on screen. And then he very nicely gets brought back to life at the end of the movie. So he would have been back for any future adventures of what had been going on in this world. But yeah, he's Jake Johnson. He's funny in pretty much everything he's in, whether it's New Girl, whether it's his voice role as Spider-Man and Into the Spider-Verse. I'm never sad to see Jake Johnson on my screen. So he's, like I said, he's probably got the least screen time of all of our main characters here, but he is by definition making the most of every scene he's got.
Andrew, I think that's a great pick. I agree. A little short on screen time, but that's fine. I do think, as far as the tone that this movie, I don't know, wants to be or should be, I'm not sure how to word that, but I think he's nailing it. I guess what I'm saying is I wish the entire movie was as consistent as his tone, where he has serious moments when he's in danger or warning people of danger or whatever, but also takes some of the supernatural stuff like really in stride and kind of recognizes the absurdity of it. Very in line with the Brendan Fraser run of Mummy movies and what I think makes those movies so successful. You mentioned he gets brought back to life at the end of the movie, and we see him and Nick like out in the desert, and Nick's looking for something, and he has the line, "Thanks for bringing me back to life and everything, but what are we doing here?" And that's perfect. Like acknowledging like you've been resurrected, but gosh golly, we're in the middle of the desert. Like I really like that tone, and I think it could have carried over more to more scenes in this movie, but anytime he's on screen, that's exactly the tone that it's nailing. And I love his look. Like once he dies, like he is a zombie, for lack of a better word, right? I mean, he's all gray flesh and one eye is like all milky and stuff. He looks gnarly. Like he looks like a genuinely very good movie zombie. But he is Jake Johnson delivering Jake Johnson style lines. And
right.
That juxtaposition of the look and the delivery and performance, I really enjoyed. I loved when he was on screen. So Andrew, I think that is an excellent pick for Mark Strong Award.
Excellent. I'm not changing it.
My Mark Strong Award, I'm going to go with a different direction here. I'm going to give it to Sophia Boutella as the titular mummy named Amunet. I think this is a very cool performance. And what I like about it is very much like a fully realized performance. A lot of times in movies like this, or even previous mummy movies, our main villain is not so much a character. They're more like a force of nature. Obviously special effects heavy, which is the same here. But there's not a lot of, you kind of get their backstory, how they became the mummy, and then boom, they have all these powers and they're trying to kill everybody, and that's it. And that's fine. That works for a lot of movies. But I think an interesting decision made with this one is to make her a more fully realized character with dialogue, with sympathetic motives at times. And we get to see her as a, like, a human in the flesh a lot, either in flashbacks or like whenever she's inside Nick's mind. We also, of course, get the mummy version where she's got all the bandages and the double pupils in her eyes. So there are times where she's working under a lot of prosthetics and makeup as CG. And at that time, it's more of like a physical performance and how she moves her body. Sophia is a former professional dancer. So I think that really comes into play with her casting here and how she's able to do a lot of the strange movements that she's able to do. So I think she just gets a lot of things right. She is creepy and unnerving in her movements. She can be obviously very attractive and seductive in those scenes that call for it. Just a lot of range. And, you know, Jake Johnson is nailing that sort of goofy, campy tone. But I think no matter what type of movie you want overall, I think your mummy has to be serious. It's got to be the straight man to the other person being a goofball. And I think she plays it totally straight. And it's one of the best, how's this for a category? It's one of the best mummy performances I've ever seen on film, Andrew. I don't know how big that list is, but
yeah, it's not a deep
I would
list.
probably put this at the top of the list there.
Yeah, she apparently, part of the reason she ends up getting this role is she does a largely silent role in the first Kingsman movie. So that kind of apparently stood out, that there was a lot of body language that she would use. She does make a lot of use of that here throughout, like I said, the physical performance. And I think this is a great pick. I think she's a great choice. I think it was a good way to go with this because you've obviously got Tom Cruise as your lead. He's the pull. And so you obviously could have cast another huge name as the Mummy, and the production suggests that several high-profile names were considered, and ultimately they land here. And like I said, I think it was a great choice. She brings a really there is a creepiness to the role, which what you want in this case. There's definitely some scenes here in this movie that were giving me some Exorcist vibes with just the way the mummy was moving and how it was kind of, especially in that sequence where she comes back to life. And I think that's all really great for the performance, but it also gives this as an opportunity for somebody that's not established to potentially have that star-making performance. And I think she, again, makes the most of every moment she has here. And so she's got a bunch of high-profile stuff coming. So in that regard, I think the movie is a success to some degree. But yeah, fantastic choice.
Also in this movie, we've talked about him already. Andrew, you know Tom Cruise is in this film? He's the lead of this movie. He plays Nick. Tom Cruise is the star of this movie. Mark Strong Award winner, Tom Cruise, from back on our episode 60 on Mission Impossible 2. The biggest movie star in the world. I mean, you know, do we need to go through his filmography? Who doesn't know who Tom Cruise is? Who doesn't have an opinion on Tom Cruise's acting abilities at this point? Tom Cruise in the movie. He's the lead. And hashtag positivity podcast. He does a good job. I mean, this guy knows how to act, right? I'm not looking at it and being like, that's a bad performance. That's not in. No, he is. There's a lot of action scenes that he is, of course, very believable in. We know he does a lot of his own stunts, and it's Tom Cruise doing Tom Cruise things. And some of the quieter moments, we see some stuff that we haven't seen from Tom Cruise in a while. This character is a little bit thirsty. Is that how you describe it? He's a little. There's some sexual tension, which we kind of don't see from like asexual Ethan Hunt. But there's some scenes in him talking about, you know, some innuendos and stuff that seem a little bit jarring to see Tom Cruise do this day and age. But he does a solid job, and that's, you know, hashtag PP. That's where I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah, I think he's. I would say he's doing what's asked of him, but he's asking the things of himself. But
he's doing what he's asking of himself.
I agree. I think he's perfectly fine in this role. Is, you know, hashtag PP. Maybe he's. I mean, as we just established, he's not the standout. But he's Tom Cruise, so he's not phoning it in. He's bringing that performance. He obviously, like we said, there's some moments here where he gets to do some things he kind of doesn't normally do, or hasn't done in a really long time. And yeah, he's checking all the boxes. And I'm curious where they would have gone with the character after the end of this film. It definitely seemed like a potentially darker performance at times. That was something I know got brought up in our Discord recently, was the idea of Tom Cruise playing villains, which is not something that he does very much, especially now. So to kind of have him see him playing a character that's kind of not as cut and dry. There's definitely shades to this character where he's kind of doing some scummy stuff. And now at the end of the film, we'll eventually talk about that a little bit more later, but he kind of finds himself in this balance that he now finds going forward. And I'm curious how they would have played that.
I think if we can let a little bit of criticism seep in here, I think maybe Tom Cruise is miscast. I know that's against what we do here, but I think that's a bit of an issue here. It's kind of with the tone this movie's going for and stuff. I'm not sure Tom Cruise is the guy you want in the lead. And Andrew, I'm going to throw another name out there, and here's the reaction I'm anticipating. I'm anticipating everyone listening to roll their eyes and then think about it for a second, and then shrug and say, maybe you're right, Chris. That's what I'm anticipating. What do you think about this for the lead of this movie? Chris Pratt. Yeah, I hear you out there, going through the motions, rolling your eyes, but then you stop and think about it. Believable in the action, appropriately quippy, handle the levity, is going to play off Jake Johnson very well. I think is more in line with the tone the film is going for. What do you think, Andrew?
I think he potentially checks some of the boxes that Cruise isn't, but I don't know if he then in turn checks the boxes that Cruise does.
That's the Star-Lord. He can do action. He's been in some military movies.
You've got a high bar when it comes to running like Tom Cruise. And
that is true.
I don't know if Chris Pratt is up for that challenge.
Maybe he runs a little bit less with him in the role. Now, here's another one. Chris Pratt, no stranger to being told he was miscast in a movie. What do you think about this, Andrew? What do you think about Tom Cruise in Jurassic World? Before you answer, imagine Tom Cruise running from a T-Rex.
Yeah, that's the greatest movie of all time, Chris.
Yes, right?
That's about as good as it gets. And Tom Cruise, being the perfectionist that he is, probably would make them really clone dinosaurs.
Yes.
He would be like, so where are we on this technology? Tom, it's not real. I understand it's not real, but where are we at? Just give me the lowdown on where we're at. How close are we? Are we looking the next 6 months? Are we talking years?
Yeah, so that's my fantasy swap. I want Chris Pratt in this movie. I want Tom Cruise in Jurassic World. Let's go. You know the scene where Chris Pratt's on his dirt bike with the raptors?
Yeah.
It's just Tom Cruise running. It's just him running. No dirt bike, just him running alongside the raptors.
And yeah, you don't threaten me with a good time, Jesus.
All right, let's make our way through the rest of the cast. We also have Annabelle Wallis as Jenny Halsey, the archaeologist of the film, and I'm just gonna move on past it, Andrew.
Sorry, I heard it and couldn't stop.
The archaeologist. It's not an easy word to say. There's like 7 syllables in there. And love interest of Tom Cruise's character, Nick. And to be perfectly blunt here, she's an archaeologist. She's interested in history. That's about as much as we get from the character most of the time. There are moments of levity and quips and bonding with Nick, but mostly it's very straightforward performance, and I think she's good. She's believable at this character and her abilities. And I guess she's an archaeologist technically, but also in leagues with the secret society that's trying to find all the monsters in the world as well. So a little bit of a double agent type performance, but I think she's great. She's got a lot of credits to her name. You've seen her in movies like X-Men First Class, Annabelle, funny enough, because that's her name. The movie Tag, which I think Jake Johnson is also in, and star of the movie Malignant, which is a wild one.
Yeah,
that I very much enjoy though. So
I know the reception to Malignant was very split, but I encourage you to watch it, and I encourage you to find out as little about it as possible before you do.
100%.
Knowing the twist of that movie is something that I believe actively takes away from the experience. In as much as knowing the twist of The Sixth Sense makes that movie kind of fall flat, I think. But yeah, Malignant is wild. I it is absolutely insane in the best way possible. Yeah, she's, like I said, tons of credits, has worked with tons of different directors. Not a lot of depth here, just and that's not limited to just her. There are a lot of people in this movie that are, I mean, you could say surface level. It's not a deep cast, interestingly enough, for such a huge blockbuster. I think our wiki page only has 8 people listed. And some of them are even pretty small in their performance. It's more like 6 or 7. But she's gets in on the action, does sit out the finale for the most part, due to death. It's
On account of death. Come down with a bad case of death.
But yeah, she's kind of, like I said, she's our link between kind of Tom Cruise's military side and the prodigium, as they're called, or prodigium, whatever they are.
You make fun of me for archaeologist. You can't say prodigium.
Exactly, Chris. When I say prodigia, it's not as bad as you messing up archaeologist. But anyway, when she brings Tom Cruise to the Prodigy, you're left to understand that there's a deeper thing here. So she exists as that narrative conduit between the two.
And like you said, there's a lot of just kind of smaller roles in this cast here. I do want a quick shout out Courtney B. Vance, who plays the commanding officer of Nick and Chris. And there's not much he's a no-nonsense military officer, barking orders. You take him very seriously, bringing some of that gravitas to the role. But just a great voice. He was a narrator on the movie Isle of Dogs, the stop-motion Wes Anderson movie that I like very much. Dude's credits go way back to the 80s. He's been around forever. Strong character actor, but strong showing it. You want a no nonsense military officer, you can do a whole lot worse than Courtney Vance.
Probably maybe best known to a lot of fans of syndicated television for being Assistant DA Ron Carver on Law and Order for a long time. And then, kind of like you said, he's been all over the place. Notably played Johnny Cochran in The People vs. O.J. Simpson, the American Crime Story version of that nugget of history. But yeah, he's here as kind of their military superior, and does not last very long. Unfortunately, ends up being one of the early victims of this curse of evil. And but yeah, when you need somebody to kind of beef up your role and add a little bit of that gravitas, can't go wrong.
And of course, we have the man, Russell Crowe, as Dr. Jekyll. Also, it's a dual role, Andrew. You ready for this? He also plays Mr. Hyde.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Whoa.
shocker. Interesting. Look, #PP. We're just going to avoid right now the fact that most of his scenes are unconnected to the mummy story being told and are clearly there to set up future stuff. Ignoring that, I think this is fantastic casting for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The dude looks intelligent, believably intelligent, and believably like he could kick your ass, especially, after he transforms. I think he plays both sides to the character very well. They went all out with the casting for these new Universal monsters, and yeah, Russell Crowe, awesome choice.
I agree. I think this is a great choice. I think this was a good casting decision. But like you said, Prodigium's role is basically they're trying to kind of capture all the forms of evil and contain them, and for the greater good type situation.
Kind of like the BRPD from Hellboy. That's what I was reminded of.
Yeah, kind of.
BRPD? BPRD? Which one is it?
BPRD. Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense.
There you go.
So yeah, but I do agree this is great casting, because like you said, he believably looks like the smart doctor who's kind of overseeing a project like this, and then when he does transform, I have no problem believing that this dude could toss Tom Cruise around like it's nothing.
Yes.
And he does a great job of it. And he rides that balance a little bit here. He gets one kind of full transformation moment and then another moment where he kind of holds it back. But by and large, I think it's good casting. Like I said, the #PP, but the Prodigium stuff just feels very disconnected, and it's clearly something where like this was going to be our kind of shield linking between all of these kind of movies, where we were going to have these guys probably kind of recur, similar to like Monarch and the Godzilla Kong stuff, or Shield in the MCU. It became a quick, easy thing to kind of build some linkage between them. But I do think this is great casting, and I'm never sad to see Russell Crowe on my screen.
Well, Andrew, it's time. It is time to talk about the scenes of this film, specifically the best scenes of the movie. And we're going to start with our favorite scenes. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this film just firing on all cylinders? What is your favorite scene in The Mummy?
Chris, I'm going to go with what might be seen as a little bit of a strange choice. I'm going to go with our scene where Aminet basically returns to life in present day. I think this is a very creepy, unsettling scene. I think it works really well for setting up the character. And I think it kind of establishes what to expect going through the rest of this film. So to this point, Aminet has been contained in the sarcophagus, the box, as Tom Cruise calls it. The writing on the box thing. But he... so obviously they get the coffin, and then there's a big plane crash. But this is in the aftermath of that. And so Tom Cruise is basically now convinced that he needs to see that the withered body is still in the sarcophagus. That way he knows that it's just messing with his head. They were just around a bunch of mercury for a long time. So he's thinking that, maybe he's not really sure what's going on. Is this real? Is it fake? Am I hallucinating things? What's going on? So they decide they need to go investigate the sarcophagus. But before they get there, there is a search and rescue type team that's surveying the wreckage of the plane crash. And they end up finding where the sarcophagus has landed. And so we get a kind of typical cat and mouse type, very horror movie type scene where we know there's something out there and we can't get eyes on it, and these guys don't see it. It's dark, it's creepy. We're in this weird kind of crashed tunnel. So there's water and just very uneven, unsettling territory. And we get our first shots of this mummy. And so she kind of comes roaring back to life, obviously in her kind of withered skeletal form. And obviously sucks the life out of these dudes, because that's what mummies do. And
That's what mummies do. Everyone, that's what mummies do.
Yeah. I mean, for coming back to life, you got to get it from somewhere. But it's, and I do like this again because it's a different kind of take on the mummy. And with this, like I said, this is kind of where I see a little bit of some Exorcist vibes, and just the way the mummy walks, the way the mummy is like walking through. You've got like limbs at angles that they don't go at. You've got very creepy, unsettling crawling through stuff. And obviously, like I said, it's dark and there's weird stringy hair. You're getting some definitely going for some horror vibes here. And I think it's fairly effective in setting a mood for this character that is unsettling and is going to be creepy and is going to be the driving force of the rest of this film. But anyway, I think this is a very effective scene at setting up this new mummy. This is a different way to do it versus the original with Boris Karloff, or even the remake from the 90s with our, the greatest actor of all time, Brendan Fraser. So I think it sets it apart, makes a different environment, makes a different feeling. And obviously, Sofia Boutella, as much as she is involved here, I know this is CGI and stuff like that, she's, again, establishing that this is a character that is not going to go down easy and was very creepy. And again, shout out to her for her performance here.
Great pick, Andrew. I do like a lot of decisions being made here. Like I said, the tone of this scene specifically is horror. There's no kind of camp or jokes, which I think is the right decision for introducing the mummy as a threat as she takes out these, officers that are searching the crash. And I like the decision to make her minions people that she's essentially sucked the life of and turned into zombies. I mean, they don't use the word zombie, but that's what they are. They're zombies, right? They look like zombies, like the life sucked out of them, and then they are like her slaves. And that's so much cooler to me than like resurrecting old like skeleton looking bodies from the ground, right?
Yep.
I think it's so much cooler to like suck the life out of a human and then take control of them. And they do a lot of cool stuff with her zombie army throughout the movie, but this is kind of the first taste that we get of it. And yeah, I mean, the movie's PG-13. And I think I could have handled this movie at 13. That's fine. But if I was like, I don't know, 8 years old, 9 years old, and I saw some of these scenes of her sucking the life out of people, It'd freak me out. It'd probably give me nightmares. And I think that's kind of the sweet spot you want for this type of movie, right? You want it to be terrifying for 10-year-olds, acceptable for teenagers. And I think they strike that balance very well. And this scene that you highlighted, one of the more horror-oriented scenes of the movie. So great pick, Andrew.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. That being said, I'm going to go in a different direction. For my favorite scene of the movie, I'm going to go with the plane sequence. Now, this is sort of, it's not the climax of the movie. It comes fairly early, but I still think it's the most well-known action scene for a variety of reasons. One, you've got the trailer that we watched earlier that kind of made the scene popular, and you've got some behind the stories of how it was shot. And the end result, I think, is just, it's just thrilling. Like, it works really well. But I like the entire plane sequence, not just the crash. So when we first start the plane scene, they're on this giant aircraft. I mean, they're in the hole, which is like just huge open area, like a military type aircraft with a sarcophagus in the middle. And Aminette possesses Chris. And apparently he got bit by a spider in a previous scene, which, gross. But he turns into like his zombie form, which, as we established, is just gnarly looking. And I love the scene where he just silently like stands up, he walks to the sarcophagus, and he's just like stabbing it. And it's just so unnerving. There's no like music or anything to accompany it. And it gives me like Resident Evil vibes. If you'll walk with me on this journey here. I'm a huge fan of the Resident Evil franchise. Basically all the games, except 6, but all the games are great. And in particular, those early games, 1 and 2, and I guess 3, they just seem ripe for a horror adaptation, but Hollywood has been struggling with that for a very long time. I have not seen Welcome to Raccoon City or the new Netflix series, so those might be doing a better job. But, you've got like the Mila Jovovich movies that go in more action direction and add new characters, and then later they're trying to backtrack and add video game characters. It just seems like people are scared to make like the straightforward horror zombie in a mansion movie that I think would work really well. And I always see like flashes of what it could be in films. Like I reference this scene in I Am Legend all the time, where he goes after his dog into the building and he's walking through real slowly with a flashlight on his gun, and he shines the light on the circle of, what are they called in that movie? Vampires.
They're vampires,
zombies, vampires. Yeah, so it just highlights all these vampires in the dark, huddled up and like breathing and panting really heavy, and they don't notice him. And he's got to silently like keep walking by him. Like, that is the most Resident Evil thing I've ever seen on film, and it's just a small segment from a different movie. And this scene is also very Resident Evil to me. He looks like a Resident Evil zombie. He's got the gnarly makeup and CG, or however they're making that effect. He looks great, and he does not move fast, but is still scary, which is not always easy to do. So you've got like our colonel there, our commanding officer, played by Courtney Vance, that we shouted out earlier, who stands up and walks over to him. He's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And then Chris just goes from stabbing the sarcophagus to stabbing him in the chest. It just slowly moves the dagger just right into his chest. Just
very passive.
Silently, it slides in, and everybody's watching. They're like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" And he turns his attention to Nick, and he walks over to him with a dagger, and he just starts like casually like swinging it at him. It's not like aggressive, but it's not like lazy. It's just like he's being puppeted, which is probably pretty accurate to what they're going for here. And I love that tone. I love a slow zombie that's still scary. They're nailing all, like I said, Resident Evil vibes in the best way possible. So it works for me a lot. Nick shoots him dead, re-dead, undead, whatever you want to call it. And then the plane is struck by a flock of birds. And in the movie, there's a lot of sound effects for this. You hear the birds coming through the glass, and it's very intense. And the plane goes down, and we got like a thrilling sequence. I mean, I think everybody is thinking like Mission Impossible when we see the sequence. It's something straight out of a Mission Impossible movie. The plane is going down, and the visual of everybody like floating through the air as if there's no gravity because it's going down, it looks fantastic. And it looks good because They really did it. They really hopped in an airplane that is made to do these stunts. It goes diving down towards the Earth so that there's no gravity. It lasts for, I think, like 2 minutes. That's how long it does it for. And they just do it over and over again. They had to do it like 60 times to get all the shots that they need. Everybody got sick, but you know what? It's Tom Cruise, man. That's what he demands. And I got to say, the end result, like you can tell, it's real. Like it doesn't look like wires or CG or goofy stuff. It looks like people floating through the air of an aircraft as it goes down, and it's so good. It's awesome. Until there's a hole ripped inside the airplane. Jenny escapes with her parachute, and Tom Cruise goes down in the crash, screaming, as we heard earlier. Associate is great. I love. It's got everything that I think is working for this movie. It's got the horror vibes. It's got the mummy in there possessing someone. It's got a thrilling action sequence. High point of the movie for me.
I agree. This is a great sequence. Fun fact. The novel I Am Legend, of which that book is based off of, written by Richard Matheson, who wrote the movie Stir of Echoes, who wrote the book Stir of Echoes was based off of. So it all comes back around to Richard Matheson.
Full
Chris.
circle. Yeah.
He also wrote Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the Twilight Zone episode. The notable, there's something on the wing of the plane.
What a career. Is the book the Omega Man?
No, the book is I Am Legend. Omega Man was a name change for Charlton Heston.
Okay. I thought Omega Man used the original title, but that was the retitle.
And there's actually an original adaptation starring Vincent Price called The Last Man on Earth. So that book has been adapted 3 different times. But anyway, this scene is incredible. It's one of those things where, like you said, you can tell. Like watching it kind of blanked on me that I'd forgotten that this was one of the, I'd really forgotten about this scene, and was watching it and I was like, man, this looks insane. And I started thinking about how did you do this? How did you did you get a rotating set and everybody's on wires? What are you doing? Because it's a continuous shot of them rolling around this cabin. It's not one of those things where it's conveniently switching angles to put them on different sides of the plane. And I was like, man, what is happening? And I looked it up, and that was just whoa. And then, obviously, the memories came flooding back. Everything I blocked out came back in about this movie, about this sequence. And I was like, man, that's Tom Cruise for you. The dude doesn't want to phone it in. He doesn't want it to look cheap. So he makes them actually do it. And like you said, they apparently had to do it 60 times. Everybody got sick. That is wild. And but yeah, the final result it speaks for itself. It is a fantastic, thrilling sequence. And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, Tom Cruise, you can land this plane. You've done it before. You know how to fly planes. What are you doing?
It's good. I mean, this movie is action packed. It starts off with an action scene very early on. The first time we see Nick and Chris in Iraq, and it just doesn't really let up. But that is the high point of the action for me. But going back to our tone conversation, and we're kind of alluding to it, that the tone of this movie it's a bit all over the place. It changes kind of from scene to scene, but #PP. The campy tone, the acknowledging the absurdity of the horror tone, when it is nailing that tone, it does it very well. And those are some of my favorite scenes of the movie. And in particular, I like whenever Aminette finally captures Tom Cruise, and her and the zombie army take him into this church, and they lay him out on a slab, and she grabs the dagger that's used to bring Set to life, and she is about to stab him. So you got all these zombies holding Tom Cruise down. You've got Aminette straddling Tom Cruise and about to bring this dagger down. And then we pan over, and Jenny has walked in, but she's just staring blankly. It's the first time she's seen the supernatural stuff, and she just has her jaw dropped. And there's a pause, and all the zombies look at her at the same time. Tom Cruise looks over at her. Aminette looks over at her. You see a shot of her. You go back to our group of people, and Tom Cruise just goes, Jenny, do something, help me. It's awesome. And then she finally just the action, and zombies chase her, and they get out of there, and then they're running away from the church. And because he's been telling her about these zombies and the mummy stuff all along, she hasn't believed him. And he's like, you saw that, right? She says, I can't unsee it. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's the dialogue. That's the tone
That's
that I want more of in this movie. But as far as the scenes where they do dial into it, that one is my favorite. Just Jenny, it's good. Loved
Ron.
it.
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
I do like that a lot. That's kind of the culmination of our mummy returning sequence as she has been sucking the life out of people, and she's getting more and more human-like at this point, and less mummy-like. And the
Probably still smells horribly though, Andrew. Imagine.
Yeah, I can't
the
imagine.
smell.
Why do you keep bringing that up? I feel like that's multiple weeks now where you're like, imagine the smell, and it's like, Chris, I don't want to. I don't
Am I
want
the
to
person
imagine
who
the
thinks
smell.
of this when I watch movies? Like,
you
what if
apparently think of the smells in a visual medium, but
they should bring smell-o-vision back? Give me like a
no,
scratch card.
no, shut up! Don't you dare wish that into existence. I don't want it. But God, what was I even talking about? Oh, but anyway, so this sequence is also the kind of first indication that the idea that the knife and the gem on it that she was gonna. So the whole culmination of this is that Tom Cruise is the chosen one, and Anamet is going to use this sacrificial dagger to basically allow the Egyptian god of death, Set, to basically inhabit his body. And she goes to do that, but finds out that the gem from the knife is missing, so it won't work. So then this obviously gives him a second to kind of recalibrate and get his stuff together, and then escape. But this is a fun sequence, and it, like you said, it's the one that kind of finally nails that tone. It feels very 99 Mummy-esque in that kind of that delivery in that tone.
I like when it leads right into, of course, an action scene, and they flee the church, they hop into a van, and there's this beautiful shot, one of my favorite shots in the movie. They're driving the van away. The camera is outside of the van. We're looking in through the driver's side window at the two of them, talking about what they just saw. And in the reflection of the window, you see a zombie running up to the van, and then it dives through the window. And it's such a just efficient shot where we get to see our leads having the conversation, and then like subtly in this reflection, you see the attack that is incoming before it happens and takes our characters by surprise. Just very, very cool stuff. And eventually the zombies cause them to crash, and we get like a one-on-one with our hero, Nick, versus the mummy for the first time. And Jenny tells him, go kick her ass. And Tom Cruise, man. He walks over to the mummy, ready to layeth the smackdown. And the mummy gives him one uppercut, and he flies through the air. Is off screen for a few seconds, lands hard on the ground, and that stuff is also great. That is one of the few times where I think the casting of Tom Cruise does enhance it a little bit, because we think of Tom Cruise as the ultimate action star, and to see him get his ass handed to him is a little bit of extra... I don't know if irony is the right word, but it's a little bit more unexpected. It's a position we don't see him in very often, being that outmatched and getting hit that hard, that comically hard. It was good. That got one of the bigger chuckles out of me in this movie.
I agree. I think this is it's definitely one of the sequences I think that kind of again works in the movie's favor, where, like you said, you're using the appearance of Tom Cruise to your advantage.
There's a bit of a twist though, where the team of the Paradigm show up and they capture the mummy. We don't know who the SWAT team is that suddenly shows up and shoots cables into her to bring her down. But they capture all of them. They put them under tranquilizers and transport them. Andrew, you know where they transport them? They transport them to this place that has a giant Ferris wheel on a river that the Fantastic Four rescued in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So this is the second appearance on our show of that giant Ferris wheel. Where is that? London? I don't even know. I just literally, I was just thinking about the Fantastic Four when I saw that.
That is a major landmark in the city of London, Chris.
Yeah, it's a major movie prop. I got it. So they
shows up all the time.
Well, 2 by my count on our show, so that's all that matters. But we get this weird point in the movie where we kind of take a break from the whole mummy thing, and we learn about this secret organization, the Pyramid, as they're called. And we get
The Paradox,
Russell Crowe giving Tom Cruise like a tour. And again, some more Resident Evil vibes as we walk through this laboratory setting with lots of like weird, scary, mutated stuff suspended in liquid in jars. They do focus a little heavily on a skull in a jar that has vampire fangs. And you gotta wonder, Andrew, is that Dracula's skull? Is he going to be resurrected? What's going to be the tie-in to that? But there's a lot of weird stuff. I'm sure there's plenty of Easter eggs in
The
that
notable
laboratory.
Easter eggs. The notable Easter eggs are indeed that vampire skull, and then a hand that appears to be from the creature of the Black Lagoon. Those are pretty much your two prominent appearances. But yeah, there's a lot of little. I didn't frame by frame it or anything. But those were the two quick ones that jumped out at me, was a vampire skull and our creature from the Black Lagoon, who was apparently previous conquests of the paradigm. And they, would we have seen how those came to be? Who knows? Who knows what all the proxy has done?
Who knows? If only more people in America had gone to the theaters.
We'd know.
It's, you know why, Andrew? It's because Tom Cruise didn't film a short video before this movie thanking people for coming to the theaters. If he had done that, I think the box office would have tripled.
If this movie had been planned to come out 3 years later, who knows what would have happened?
We do get a fight here. We get to see Mr. Hyde for the first time. And I've acknowledged it already, but it's a bit weird that the movie kind of comes to a halt and starts focusing on other stuff that is clearly just to set up the future of the universe. I know it's one of the major criticisms of the movie, and I'm not going to tell you that it's an invalid one, but #PP. Let's look at this fight and some of this cool stuff that happens. I think Mr. Hyde has a pretty cool design. I mean, it's just Russell Crowe, just really as big as a pro wrestler is basically what happens. He's really muscly. I was kind of waiting for him to fully Hulk out and transform, kind of we've seen in other adaptations, and it doesn't quite go that far, and it's a little unclear if he's taking medication to keep Hyde at bay, so maybe this isn't his full form, maybe it's just a half Hyde, and it's a little unclear, but regardless, it's a cool design, and in particular, he's locked in this room with Tom Cruise, and earlier in the movie, we see Dr. Jekyll leave the room by putting his hand on a hand scanner by the door, and it says Dr. Jekyll, and it lets him out. And Tom Cruise is trying to escape this room now, fighting Hyde, and he puts Hyde's hand against the same hand scanner, and it scans it, and it now says Edward Hyde. Andrew, that is cool. That's a cool.
It's a cool little touch, and it obviously, again, it's a quick indicator that this is an actual transformation. It's not just now he's angry. But he's actually changing into somebody else to the point that this system can recognize it, and that was a cool little thing.
Andrew, there's a naked Tom Cruise sequence in this movie.
There is indeed, when we speak about things that Tom Cruise hasn't done in a long time.
I haven't seen him naked with eyes wide shut. It's the last time we've seen some Tom Cruise body. I don't know where
Probably Tom Cruise body.
But, I mean, you don't see his butt. We don't get a classic butt shot. Of course we don't see dong. We talked about this in Justice. Back on Predator 2 episode. Just not enough dong on film, I say. But we get the very cartoonish two hands between his legs. Yeah. Shuffle backwards away from everybody. Yeah. So that's
two
fun.
hands there, son.
Andrew, there's I mentioned earlier, Chris got bit by a spider. Personally, one of the more terrifying scenes of the movie for me.
Absolutely.
When they're in that tomb, and they bring the sarcophagus out, the place is just flooded with spiders. And immediately when I turned away, I can't watch this stuff. I looked away until it was over. And immediately I'm I really miss the CG beetles from the 1999 movie. Those were cool.
I knew those
I
were
can
fake.
handle. Yeah. 100%. And I don't know if these are CG spiders, real spiders in mix. I don't know. Tom Cruise assures me they're just camel spiders. They're not even poisonous. As if that matters. As if that makes a difference. I can totally relate
If I
to
get
Chris.
bit by 1,000 camel spiders at the same time, Tom Cruise, I'm probably still dying.
Or getting possessed by a mummy. I can totally relate to Jake Johnson's character Chris, who just opens fire on the spiders. It's exactly what I would do. I'd just start shooting at them. Yeah, no, that is gross. Andrew, look, I shouldn't be saying this on this podcast. That's gonna be heard by a bunch of people, but I feel like I have to. I'm gonna be vulnerable right now. In front of everybody. I have a lot of people think spiders are gross. A lot of people don't want to mess with them. I legitimately have a fear of spiders. I don't know if I'm allowed to call it arachnophobia or if like a doctor needs to tell me that, but it is like when I say I looked away from the screen, like I can't watch the screen. A friend of the show, my wife, is the one. If a spider is bigger than the size of let's say a nickel, my wife is the one that is gonna kill it. I can't do it. It is literally in her wedding vows that she will kill the spiders. I can't look at them. I can't think about them. It's rough. And I'm bringing this up because, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Andrew. Oftentimes when people find out that I'm scared of spiders, one, they don't believe it's as bad as it is. It's like you can't even look at them. I can't explain it, but I can't. But two, a lot of times people, friends, so-called friends of mine, family members, will think it's funny to like send me a picture of a close-up of a spider, or like a video where like a spider crawls out of a toilet paper roll or something. Like, oh, check this out, and then a spider jumps out. I don't find it funny, and so I'm curious, Andrew, am I being like a stick in the mud, or is it genuinely not cool to try to make somebody like face something that they are terrified of? What's your read on this, Andrew?
Your friends are being jerks, Chris.
Ah, thank you, sir. And the reason I'm scared to bring it up is because now a lot of people out there know that I'm scared of these things, and I'm scared of getting like DMs now from people that think they're being funny. But I'm telling you, like
I'm telling you right now, folks,
it's not funny.
If you send Chris pictures of spiders, you are genuinely being a bad person. And I want you to take what I'm saying to heart, because what he has just revealed to you is that this is something that genuinely causes him actual discomfort. And if you engage in something that knowingly causes discomfort for another person, you are being a bad person. This doesn't just apply to Chris. This applies to all facets of your life. If you do things to cause others discomfort, it is not funny. It is mean. If you laugh at the person throughout their discomfort, it is not funny. It is mean. If I laugh with you, it's a joke. If I'm not laughing, you're just mocking me. We can all grow and be better, and I'm trusting you all to do that now. We will not take kindly if you use this information to nefarious means. Thank you.
Andrew, that was beautiful. I'm going to cut that soundbite out. I'm going to keep it handy on my phone. If someone sends me something, I'm responding with that. I'm like, look, take this as a growing moment. Take this, as a moment to reflect on yourself and what you find as an acceptable sense of humor. So, this has been a very weird PSA from Best of the Rest, but we thank you for listening. And don't make me I've not banned anybody from our Discord, but don't make me do that. Well, also in that tomb, Andrew, aside from the horde of spiders, I'll just read you my note. It says, Mercury looks cool. Spiders do not.
I mean,
because there's scenes of like Mercury dripping from the, what are they? What hangs tight to the ceiling, Andrew? What are those spikes in caves?
Stalagmites?
Stalactites.
No.
It's like tights. Stalagmites might reach
ground?
the ceiling. Stalactites hold tight to the ceiling. Yeah, I think that's right. Stalactites. And they're dripping with mercury, and it falls on the ground, or it runs off like Tom Cruise's hand and leaves behind no trail. And Mercury's cool, man. The properties of Mercury, the way it moves across the ground, it looks awesome. The way they could pull the sarcophagus out of the Mercury and the Mercury runs off, but doesn't leave the sarcophagus wet because there's no residue left behind. That's really cool. I'm curious how much of that was CG and how much of that was real Mercury. But
I'm guessing none of it was real Mercury, given that Mercury genuinely drives you insane.
Well, I'm pretty sure they use Mercury in Terminator 2 whenever the T-1000 like reforming. I'm pretty sure we see drops of Mercury. Like, I think that was, yeah, definitely wasn't. There's no CG in Terminator 2. But no, I think there was a shot of real Mercury. 2. It's possible to film some things with Mercury. I doubt there was a giant vat of it or a giant pool.
Yeah, Mercury's just dangerous. So no,
the shot of like Mercury running down the drain could have been real Mercury. It's Tom Cruise. It's a Tom Cruise movie. Don't underestimate.
I will drive myself insane for the sanctity of this film.
But yeah, Mercury looks cool.
It does look very cool. It's also dangerous. Hence the name Mad Hatter.
We are full of PSAs in this episode. Mercury's dangerous. Don't bite your thermometers. Even though I don't think there's mercury in thermometers anymore. But still don't bite
anymore,
a thermometer.
No.
Still not a good idea.
Who buys liquid thermometers anymore anyway?
That's a good point. What kind of thermometer do you have in your house, Andrew?
I have a digital.
Is it but is it like put under your tongue type thermometer?
Yeah, I have.
We have the forehead scanner ever since the lockdown started. We get that forehead one.
That's so I used to have like an old one of those old liquid crystal ones that you put on your forehead, and it like revealed your temperature across because I don't remember what those were called. I don't know, but yeah, I have a digital one, but it's not mercury.
Got it. Well, Andrew, look, we've talked about a lot of scenes. We've talked about some things that work. We've hinted at things that don't, but that's not the focus here. But we have to discuss the finale of this movie, the final fight between Tom Cruise and the Mummy. And we'll set up the finale here. Ginny has been killed. She has experienced death. Her body is lying there alongside the fight. And so we have Amunet dead set on using this dagger to bring Set to the mortal world within Nick. And Nick trying to stop her and destroy the mummy. And she says something to him like, well, why don't you want this? It will give you the power over life and death. And Tom Cruise starts to, some gears start turning in his head, and he looks over at Ginny and realizes that he has the power to resurrect those that he loved and has lost. And so he stops himself from getting stabbed by the dagger, takes the dagger away, and then stabs himself, Andrew. He willingly sacrifices himself to let Set into our world. And what actually happens is he's still there. Nick is still there in that body, but also with the powers of Set. They're kind of fighting for control. You can tell by his eyes whether it has two pupils or one pupil, who's kind of in control there. It's a interesting twist at the end of the movie that I did not see coming. But he does have these powers. He destroys Amunet. He brings Ginny back to life, and then he runs away because the platform arrives to capture him because he is now a monster, and he flees. He brings Ginny back to life, but can't be with her. Kind of a classic monster trope, right? The tragic monster. And so we took an interesting path to get here, but it definitely sets stuff up. Weird, interesting, strange future for this franchise that never comes to be. But what are your thoughts on this last fight, Andrew?
Well, like I said, it does take a twist that I didn't expect. I wasn't expecting him to just kind of give himself the powers. I do think the bit with the pupils is a neat little riff on that, just to kind of give you a quick visual indicator, kind of who's in charge. Obviously, the dual pupils is basically both of them are there. But if he can kind of control it, he can keep it to just the one. But I think that was just a cool effect because it's on our main antagonist pretty much the whole film, and it's just a pretty gnarly look. But yeah, it's an interesting little flip on pretty much any mummy story told to this point, because they pretty much all classically end with the mummy
either being destroyed or being thrown back into, his sarcophagus. That's how the original in 32 ends. It's how the one in 99 ends. That's pretty much the ending, as the mummy is defeated. So in this one, the mummy is defeated, but in such a way that Tom Cruise kind of becomes the new mummy in a way. Like
I wanted to ask you that, Andrew. Have you've seen The Last Samurai, right?
Yeah. Once upon a time.
Well, my question about that movie is, who is the Last Samurai? Is it Ken Watanabe? Or is it Tom Cruise?
Yes.
It's kind of open for interpretation.
I believe that's the intention. Is that you can kind of view it from either end.
I was not expecting the same thing to happen here. Who is the titular mummy? Is it Aminet? Or is it now Tom Cruise?
Well, because that was going to be, like I said, that was the interesting dichotomy we were going to have going forward, was this Tom Cruise kind of with these powers, kind of battling this evil inside of it. And it would have been an interesting place to go, because it potentially could lead to him being a villain type character. I do think it's interesting that they do make a point to use Set as the deity, even though Set is not historically known as the god of death in Egyptian lore. That's more Osiris, who's the god of the underworld. But I can't imagine it was a mistake. But they use Set pretty deliberately. But I've never seen him really called the god of death. So I thought that was an interesting choice. But either way, like I said, it sets us up for the future. Obviously, Jake Johnson is brought back to life at the end, and gets to resume his quips in the flesh now, as opposed to in the mind. And it would have been interesting to see where this potentially led. It is one of those things that the kind of flame out is this. The legacy of this movie is basically like it crushed an entire studio's plans for the future, which it's not pretty much any shared universe plan that's not the MCU or maybe Godzilla Kong has rarely gone as according to plan. The first installments tend to be, they fail to meet expectations and it kind of tanks the whole thing. And this is an even more wilder example because it's technically the second time that happened. So it's a weird thing to see. But I can't pretend there's not a weird curiosity at what the end game of all of this would have been. I mean, the idea of potentially having Tom Cruise, at the time, Johnny Depp, Javier Bardem, Russell Crowe, potentially Angelina Jolie, like all of them in the same movie together, that's a stacked cast, Chris.
That's nut. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's interesting. We're not gonna. It's one of those cases where we tell you, like, I'm not gonna convince you The Mummy 2017 starring Tom Cruise is a great film we all overlooked. That's just not the case. But if you have that curiosity of like, what were they setting up? What was this gonna look like? This feeds into that curiosity. This has a lot of stuff jam-packed into it. That is, at the very least, I'm gonna say this movie is interesting and worth watching if you have that curiosity, for sure. I'm glad I saw it finally.
Yeah, me too. Although I will say, talking about this movie is very strange because you keep calling Tom Cruise Nick because that's his character's name. But Jake Johnson plays Nick on New Girl, so I've been confused this whole time, Chris.
Oh, okay.
You keep saying Nick does this, and I was like, no, Jake Johnson is dead at this point. Nick's not doing anything.
Well, Jake Johnson plays Chris in this movie, so that was very easy
I
for
understand.
me to identify him as Chris.
Sometimes it's easier, Chris, but for me, it's not. Yeah, this is definitely a strange movie in that, like, what it was supposed to do versus ultimately what it ends up being. I do think it acts as an interesting split from the previous kind of big budget takes on the Mummy, when you've got like 1932's Mummy, the one obviously starring Boris Karloff, which I think is an interesting take too. Now, the Mummy is not like Dracula or Frankenstein or the Invisible Man or any of them. There's no book source for the Mummy movie. There's not like a classic piece of fiction that was turned into the Mummy movie. It actually kind of spun out of an attempt to make a film about Cagliostro. And that one's interesting because the guy gets brought back, but then the interesting twist there is he then there's like a 10-year jump where the mummy just assimilates back into society, and then the story picks back up. So it's that itself is an interesting thing to do, to just have the mummy return, and then he just kind of disappears for a long time, putting his plan into motion. The plan is always relatively the same. This movie does flip it up a little bit. It's usually the mummy is trying to resurrect his lover, because that's usually how he gets killed in the first place, especially in the original, where he gets killed for sacrilege because he's trying to bring his lover back to life. And then in the 99 film, our lead mummy is killed because he's having an affair with the woman. And then in this one, we flip it up. I think that's a good way to kind of approach it, to not just do another version of that same story. But like you said, unfortunately, the legacy and the reception of this movie left it as a one-off versus a potential universe-starting legacy. Obviously, I think everybody involved has gone on and done well for themselves. This obviously isn't holding anybody back. And I think I think several people did make the most of it. And it's definitely worth checking out, at least for, like I said, a out of at least nothing but mere curiosity. But yeah, unfortunately, this was the beginning and end of the Dark Universe.
Well, that is The Mummy. The Mummy 2017 specifically. There's at least 3 movies simply called The Mummy. At least they're all reboots, though, and not sequels to each other. That's when it gets confusing. There's 3 Shaft movies, and one is a sequel to the other.
There are 5 movies in the Shaft timeline. 3 of them are called Shaft.
There's 3 Halloween movies. One is a reboot, and one is a sequel to the first one.
Oh my god!
What are you doing over there, Hollywood?
Come on!
But it's reboot month. It's going to roll on next week with another monster movie, Godzilla, starring Matthew Broderick. Remember that Godzilla movie from the 90s, Andrew? Do you remember this? You seen this?
I do. I saw it in theaters. I'm fairly certain.
I know that I did, and I'm excited to talk about it. We'll be doing that next week. But for now, it's time for our question of the week. We're going to pull this from the Discord, the question of the week channel. If you're already in that Discord, be sure you leave us a question there for a future episode. If you have yet to join our Discord, seriously, what are you waiting for? It is free. I'm not charging you money to do this. There's a link in our show notes. Go ahead and join. It's simply an app that you'll be able to download or log into a web browser if you don't want any more apps on your phone. And you can chat with us and the community about movies and video games and music and all kinds of nerdy stuff. And of course, ask us questions like this question that comes from Tucker, who says, I'm excited for the new Blade movie starring Mahershala Ali, but who would you want as Whistler? I was thinking Ron Perlman, but then I remembered that he was in Blade 2. Well, that's a good question, Tucker. We're going to do a little bit of fantasy casting here. Who we want as Whistler, the mentor for Blade. Speaking of fantasy casting, there's a channel in our Discord dedicated to fantasy casting movies. Again, join us. But Whistler. Mahershala Ali's Blade's Whistler. First of all, he suggests Ron Perlman. I can see that. I don't think the fact that he was in Blade 2 is really an issue. I mean, it's the MCU now. It's fine. He was interacting with Blade in a different universe. I know we get the multiverse stuff that gets confusing, but I think there's no issue with casting him as Whistler. I think that's a fine enough choice, Andrew, but who comes to your mind?
John Goodman.
John Goodman. I did not see that coming. John Goodman as Whistler. You know, John Goodman's funny. He's been around for, decades. I've known about him since Roseanne, probably the first thing I saw him in. Early Coen Brothers movies. Community. I mean, like, decades now. I've seen this man, and my mental image of him has not changed, even though I've watched his work over the course of 30 years, and he's obviously changed. He's gotten older. But even like when I see him like in Community or 10 Cloverfield Lane, I'm kind of picturing the same guy from Roseanne, just a little bit older, but like the same guy. However, he is old. I'm saying this respectfully. He's up there, right? How old is John Goodman?
He's 70.
70? All right, appropriately aged to play Whistler, and I would like to see him kind of play up that age a little bit. Not that he's always trying to act like he's young and old or anything, but I don't know if I've really seen a movie he's in where it's kind of playing up the fact that he is an elderly gentleman, and I think they could give him that look for Whistler. I think it would work. Are you picturing Whistler as like a little bit comedic? I think of John Goodman as always having a little bit of comedy in his work. Not always the case, but what's your reasoning for this, Andrew?
Maybe a little bit of sardonic sense of humor there, but I think I look at something like, say, 10 Cloverfield Lane, where he's basically playing it straight the entire time. Very little humor in his performance in something like 10 Cloverfield Lane. But you contrast that with something like, say, The Big Lebowski, where he's being funny, but not in like a slapstick kind of way. Like his character is kind of funny more through just how ridiculous he is. So he can do that humor that's a little bit more underlying versus overt. And I think if you take his character from 10 Cloverfield Lane and you mash it together with Walter from The Big Lebowski, you basically get what I would envision his version of Whistler would be. And I want to see it.
He's just always yelling at Blade about Nom.
Yeah, exactly.
Fighting vampires is hard.
My friends did not die face down in the muck for you to sit here and quit on me.
You're out of your element, Fury.
See, exactly. I'd watch it.
Okay. Well, I'm on board now. That is now officially my answer. But there was some responses in the Discord. Some people chimed in. Mike Lynch said Kurt Russell could work. Yeah, 100%. I mean, he kind of has that.
I'm sure Kurt Russell, Jeff Bridges, and Chris Christopherson are all just like, in your mind, interchangeable. So,
and Nick Nolte, let's not forget.
Sure, yes.
Nick Nolte and Chris Christopherson, they are, come on, they're the same person.
I would buy more Chris Christopherson than Jeff Bridges than the same person, but whatever.
Wait a minute. You think Chris Christopherson and Jeff Bridges look similar, but not Jeff Bridges and Kurt Russell?
No, I don't, Chris.
That is, Andrew, you're insane. You're the insane one here. Mike Lynch also
it's the children who are wrong.
Mike Lynch also just suggests it's a long shot, but with Marvel's money, Jack Nicholson. Clearly, we're going for like an older gentleman with disheveled hair. I think we have Chris Christopherson in mind, and that's what we're fantasy casting here. Jack Nicholson. That would be
ridiculous.
It's hard for me to picture Jack Nicholson in such what I assume would be a minor role. Definitely a firmly supporting character role, right? I mean, the most recent like The Departed, even. Like, he's not the main character, but he is a prominent figure in that movie. I know this is fantasy casting and all, but I think Jack Nicholson is all but retired at this point. He
hasn't made a movie in 12 years, so yeah.
Yeah, he. I'm pretty sure he's not in great health, and
he's also 85.
Kept under wraps here. Hey man,
he is.
Clint Eastwood's older, 112, and he's still making.
He is older than Chris Christopherson is now, and Chris Christopherson was Whistler the first time around. But no, I agree that I think Jack Nicholson. I think this is a Sean Connery type situation where I think he's just kind of slowly living out his last days in his best way possible, because he can.
With Blow and Hooker. I'm sorry.
Probably. I mean, Jesus. Wouldn't you?
Mike Lynch also suggests Keith David as well.
Now this I actually think is a great choice, and is actually something that I wouldn't be shocked if this is a way they end up going with it. I think it's a cool move, just because Whistler, there's nothing about Whistler really that requires him to be a specific race, and I think Keith David obviously he's Keith David. There's nothing else to say. He's nobody's fourth Ghostbuster, man. He's He's that's my favorite line he's ever said in his entire career. But no, this is I mean, obviously things like They Live, and then just everything he's done. He's great, and he's got that voice. He's got the voice,
Yeah.
man.
Such a cool voice.
He'd
You
be
know
great.
what? All these years in the decorated career of Keith David, I always go to Something About Mary first. That's the first performance I think of. Him just being an ass to Ben Stiller is very funny. Or how'd you get the beans about the Frank? I mean, come on, talk about great Keith David lines.
Yeah, that's about as iconic as it gets. But just yeah, I think this would be that would be a great choice. Personally, I wouldn't have a problem at all with them going in that direction for this. And you know, again, Keith David is somebody that I have absolutely no concern could tussle with a vampire and come out on top. Like I would more be shocked. Like if a vampire gets the jump on Keith David, I'm going to be like, this is ridiculous. Stop this movie now. This is ridiculous.
Took me right out of it.
Oh my god, this is ridiculous.
Mike Lynch threw one more out there just to see something different. Daniel Craig. I think Daniel Craig's great. He can do anything. I'm sure he could work. I'm having a little bit of a hard time picturing it in my mind.
I think they would. I think if
But
Marvel
sure.
were going to get Daniel Craig, they would put him in something more prominent. I don't think. I as far as whether or
think
not
Marvel-
he'd be good for the role, I don't know.
I think Marvel would want that for him, but I think Daniel Craig would do the Christian Bale thing. Where like, yeah, I'll be the MCU, but like I'm a villain that's going to show up once. Like I'm not going to be your 10 picture deal kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I think after James Bond, he's like, well, I guess he's doing a franchise kind of with the Knives Out thing, but
those like
I
lower
think
stakes too. I think that's a.
I think he likes
different
playing that
kind of
role a lot more.
franchise. Like,
yeah,
and obviously, like there's no like hard physical demands. He doesn't have to get in. Like, he doesn't have to be super shredded to be Benoit Blanc. Like, as far as franchises go, Knives Out is probably about as easy as it gets. You get to show up at fantastic locations, work with A-list actors and actresses, playing a character that, like I said, doesn't require you to be like 0% body fat. So, that's why Benoit Blanc is probably the role of a lifetime as far as he's concerned, because it's checks all the boxes without nearly, like I said, the physicality or the stunts of something like a James Bond. And honestly, I would never want Knives Out to be that. I would never want it to be like a giant action franchise. That's not what those stories are. But yeah, that would be, I'm having a hard time seeing that one. Not to say he wouldn't be great and obviously wouldn't crush it, but not quite feeling that one.
I guess I'll throw one out there because I've just been agreeing with other people, so I got to contribute something here.
Yes.
And I know it couldn't happen in the MCU, but Michael Keaton as Whistler.
That would have been great.
Awesome.
It would.
He's already in the MCU as Vulture, so they're not going to do it. But I think it kind of goes back to like people have talked about a Batman Beyond movie for a long time with Michael Keaton as the old Bruce Wayne mentor role, and I think he would crush it. I mean, his sense of humor and his sarcasm, but toughness at the same time is just tailor made for like a superhero mentor. So why not Whistler, right? I mean, I would love to see him go back and forth with Mahershala, but yeah, any of those. I have a feeling it's going to be none of those. We'll see who they pick, but hey, if it is one of them, you can say that you heard it here first on Best of the Rest. So thanks for the question, Tucker, and I am excited for that Blade movie, just because I have no idea what it's going to look like, but Mahershala Ali as Blade is, you know, if you're not bringing Wesley Snipes back, I think that's as good as it gets.
I agree.
Have you seen Alita Battle Angel yet?
No.
And the movie I've been telling you to watch for like 5 years now. Very good, very underrated. I love that movie. One of the best looking movies Robert Rodriguez has ever made. It's fantastic. Can't say enough good things about it, but Mahershala Ali is in it. He wears a long black jacket and sunglasses at night. He looks like Blade. So if you need like test screen footage of what he's going to be like as Blade, I highly recommend Alita Battle Angel. And it's just a great movie, so everyone should watch it.
I thought you were going to say Keith David was in it, and then I would have watched it immediately. But unfortunately.
Oh, Andrew, Keith David is in it. You won't believe this.
I'm gonna be so upset when I get to the end of that movie, Chris. I'm gonna be like,
There
this
is a
terrible.
fun
Zero Keith Davids.
There is a fun uncredited performance in that movie that hits
All right,
kind of
don't
late
tell
in the
me.
movie. That I won't tell you. It is fun though. It is good. It's another instance just like The Mummy, where we're probably not going to know what happens next. I don't think we're getting any more Alita movies. That it's a shame because it's awesome, but at least we got the one that we got, right? Hashtag PP.
Robert Rodriguez is trying to keep the faith alive. So
Yeah, but James Cameron was a huge creative part of that movie, and he's making. I don't know if you heard this, Andrew. He's making this franchise called Avatar. He's making like 12 of them simultaneously, I think. That's going to last the rest of his mortal life. So,
not familiar.
little indie hit. All right, Andrew. Let's get out of here. We'll be back next week with Godzilla, and please remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. The movie came out the same year as I See Dead People. What's that called?
Sixth Sense.